So this is Louis, and as I mentioned in a stream, I'm doing a follow-up video to my previous video talking about Far Cry 6, because one of the aspects in talking about the game, I mentioned the fact that initially the director that's overseeing the creation of the game, he's like the creative director, so the vision of the game is effectively his vision. And when questioned about the politics of the game, and a similar thing happened with Far Cry 5, where there was questions based around, well, is there political messaging in this game and that, and they had to deny it, and I would say that overall the game wasn't political, but there was enough progressive crap shoveled into the game that one can make the argument that yes, it was. So while the overall narrative of the game and the setting and the antagonist in that, it wasn't really political in that, people mean propaganda. The problem is that there's enough woke crap in the game that it's kind of hard to just ignore it and say, well, no, there is no propaganda in this game, when it's like, yeah, there was. It fell on its face, and it was the worst aspect of the game. With the amount of woke crap that was present in the game, it's hard to just say, oh, well, no, in fact, this is totally apolitical, and this is just about the content itself and creating a world that, people want to find exciting or interesting. It's really hard to sell it at that point. It's just a matter of, it wasn't so cumbersome that it ruin the game, but it's like, yeah, it's the worst aspect of the game, so what exactly can you do other than, not put that in the game? But being that the industry is in the state that it's in, it's just something I come to expect. I expect every game to have some amount of this shit in it, and it seems like every game I play, it has some level of woke crap in it. Really unimaginative, really carbon copied, you can see in these games. It doesn't really require me to give you much in the way of an explanation. If you recognize it, you know what it is. I'm really past the point. We're kind of far down the line from when I would spend the time giving examples and that. Because it's like, yeah, you can go watch my videos from 5 years ago if you want that explanation. It's based around gender, it's based around race, etc. It's very easy to recognize because it hasn't changed in those many years. It's the same shit, just on repeat. Like I say, carbon copy is a good example. Carbon copy is a good way of phrasing it because it hasn't changed. It's in many ways static. When every game has a resistance, it's like, yeah, it's propaganda. The whole purpose of it is propaganda. And yet, has anything really changed? So it's not, I don't need to give you an example because it's just there. It's been there for years. And in Far Cry 6, in the same way, I expect it. I just expect it because it was in Far Cry 5. So I expect it in Far Cry 6. The question is, how much of it is there, and is it enough to just say, fuck it, I'm not buying this game? A positive sign that I pointed to in my original video was the fact that the narrative director behind the game, who's effectively the creative director behind the game, he went out of his way to say to the media that this game in it of itself is not propaganda. This game is just about, you're the protagonist. There's an antagonist. You're fighting this antagonist and his faction in this open world. It's a Far Cry game. This is probably going to be a game more similar to Far Cry 4, and with that, you pretty much know what you're going to get. It's the 6th installment, and I think there's even more than that. I think there's 8 in this franchise, so you kind of know what you're going to get. And yet, only days pass from the original statement. I think what finally tipped the scales was on the 30th of May, IGN covered this, and I think that someone got into this guy's ear. And if I had to bet, I would wager that is in effect what happened. Either someone got in this guy's ear, or a manager told this guy to issue a statement just full of woke bullshit. Just as vague, as specious, just make it sound as though that this game is as woke as can be. We don't know who is actually the source, but the guy that's going to, bite the bullet is the creative director, because he's the guy that, in all likelihood, was told to say this to the media. Was told to say this game is not woke, this is just about making a good game. And when IGN covered it the next day, so this article was written at 7:30 on May 30th. The very next day, which was Memorial Day, a federal holiday, someone showing up, the creative director's already behind the keyboard, has a written statement already ready, and someone at Ubisoft is releasing this statement on his behalf. And I will read you that statement. Before I do, I'm just going to say that this is a very vaguely worded, vaguely phrased virtue signal. There is nothing to this. This statement from the creative director does not actually say that, well, this game is woke, fuck the right, and all this sort of other nonsense. What I have seen is that they've pivoted from authoritarianism to fascism. That's the word that they're now using to describe the enemy faction in this game. It's gone from authoritarian to fascist explicitly. And I have to imagine that isn't really reflected in the game. I don't think it is going to be, in fact, fascist in the game. I think it's just going to be generically authoritarian, generically dictatorial. My experience says that they aren't going to get into the nitty-gritty of the ideology of the faction in this game, the dictator in this game, because they've never done that before. They've never actually gotten into the belief set. It's very generic, very vague. The good example of that is Jacob Seed in Far Cry 5. He has a belief set. He has beliefs. Are they very well articulated? Are they, no, it's not very deep. It's usually very surface level. The person usually wears what they believe on their sleeve, and it's usually pretty simple to understand, and they're repetitive about it. They'll repeat themselves ad nauseum about the very simple concepts that they use to support their actions. It's never, ever been very complicated in terms of these games. And even in Far Cry 2, when it came to whatever the Jackal or whatever the name of the antagonist was in that game, even with him, it was just very surface level with the appearance of complexity, but nothing really to it. And that's what, like, an antagonist from the series that people laud and love, and it's like, nah, it's a shitty character from a crap game where there was nothing really to it. You just were 13 years old when you played it and you thought it was the shit, so that's why you have nostalgia about it. But in reality, was there really much to it? No. And nothing's really changed over the years. And so when it comes to this game, I think that it's going to be the same. That this statement is just empty. There is going to be woke shit in the game, and it's going to be like every other forced-in, shoehorned piece of crap that's in, in all the other games. So I will read you this statement. Our story is political. Ooh, is it? A story about a modern revolution must be. Well, no, it doesn't. This is based in a fictional universe that in many ways contradicts the universe that you claim to have set up in previous games. There is no actual timeline in these games. There is no actual continuity to these games. It's impossible for that to be the case. There are hard, relevant discussions in Far Cry 6 about the conditions that lead to the rise of fascism in a nation. I doubt it. The costs of imperialism, I doubt it. Forced labor, I'm sure that's going to be one thing that's portrayed in one scene, and that's it. The need for free and fair elections, okay, sure. LGBTQ plus rights. What? And more within the context of Yara, a fictional island in the Caribbean. My goal was to empower our team to be fearless in the story we are telling, and we worked incredibly hard to do this over the last 5 years. You have not been working on this game for 5 years. I'm sure the idea of this game may have existed for 5 years. Like, hey, let's have a dictator in a Caribbean setting. Maybe that's been around for 5 years. But you've been writing this and designing this for 5 years? My ass. Yeah, sure. Just like every Call of Duty. 5 years they've been spending on those games. Yeah, I'm sure. But also other countries around the world that have experienced political revolutions in their histories. Fucking every one. Wow. In our approach, we have made sure to seek creators and collaborators for our team who can speak personally to the history and cultures of the regions we were inspired by. That's a nice virtue signal. We also brought on experts and consultants to examine the game story multiple times over the course of the project to make sure that it was being told with sensitivity, which, again, just diversity hires for the sake of the woke crap they're going to include in the game. This does not speak to the actual merit of the story you're trying to tell or the setting or anything else. This is woke consultants that your managers tell you to bring in so that you can portray women as men and all the other things. This is not about anything more than, is this game going to offend random faggots on Twitter? Okay, no? Great. And we all suffer the consequences of these consultants because they're not actually making these games better. It's just about making the right content. It is not for me to decide if we succeeded, but I can say we absolutely tried. Nice limp-wristed comment right there. The conversations and research done on the perspectives of those who fought revolutions in the late 1950s, early 1960s, and beyond are absolutely reflected in our stories and story and characters. Okay, sure. But if anyone is seeking a simplified binary political statement specifically on the current political climate in Cuba, they won't find it. I am from a family that has endured the consequences of revolution. And it's just amazing to me that you in any way, shape, or form that you're going to portray this as sympathetic to the left or from a left-wing perspective or anything else. Like, you're a fucking refugee of a communist revolution in Cuba that was utterly fucking barbaric and authoritarian. The idea that you can any way portray this as left-wing, like the skew of this is going to be left-wing, such as it was in Watch Dogs Legion, where it made no sense on its face as a direct consequence. This is what I anticipate, but it's like the fact that you are willing to do this, and you probably are. I'm assuming the worst in you, just based on playing previous Ubisoft games, that you are going to skew this with a left-wing bent, whereas the reality of the situation that you are naming is barbaric and horrible directly from the left. I have debated revolution over the dinner table my entire life. I can only speak for myself, but it is a complex subject that should never be boiled down to one quote. One quote being, it's not political propaganda, please buy the game. What players will find is a story that's point of view attempts to capture the political complexity of a modern present-day revolution within a fictional context. We have attempted to tell a story with action, adventure, and heart, but that also isn't afraid to ask hard questions. I sincerely doubt it. Far Cry is a brand that in its DNA seeks to have mature, complex themes. Mature themes maybe, but complex never. Balanced with levity and humor. One doesn't exist without the other, and we have attempted to achieve this balance with care. My only hope is that we are willing to let the story speak for itself first before forming hard opinions on its political reflections. Thank you for reading Navad Kavari, who lists himself as the narrative director, but is, as far as I know, the creative director for Far Cry 6. And with that statement, like I said, there's nothing really solid here. There's nothing really deep or something that you can specify and latch onto. It's all very generic. It's all very passive. There is nothing about this that actually speaks to the actual content of the game outside of, like I said, the only thing that I could specify is they brought in consultants, left-wing consultants, to consult on, the Thetan level of this fucking game as it relates to the progressive stack, the progressive narratives, progressive orthodoxy. That's the only thing that I can believe and I see specified in this actual press release or statement from Navid here. There's nothing more to this that you can latch onto because everything else is generic, and the things that they mentioned that are going to be featured in the game, I doubt. Because as it was with Cyberpunk and any other of these games that say, well, we're going to have this in it, we're going to have that in it, we're going to touch on this. It's like, because of the trash in our trash can, that means this. And so it's all very blurred and stretched and exaggerated, and I imagine that that is going to be the case with this game, because there's no way that you can go from our game is very specifically based only in fiction and is not political to everything in this game is political within a couple days. There's no way that you can do that and be telling the truth, and I imagine that the truth of the matter is that this game overall is not political propaganda, but does have woke crap shoehorned into it that is going to be the worst aspect of the game. Because that is true for so many... it's true for Far Cry games, and it's more true for Ubisoft games. You include woke shit, it's the worst part of the game. But as it relates to, it's all this stuff. It's all these complex themes. It's like, nah, you're full of shit. That's never been true for the Far Cry series. And I can't imagine that the paymasters at Ubisoft are going to let you do it. There's no way. There's no way that they're going to let you make this game total political propaganda. It is not going to happen. It would be totally out of left field or totally out of nowhere that this would occur. If it is going to be political propaganda, it is going to be in the same respect of Watch Dogs Legion. That, I would say, is the best you're going to get for propaganda. Is there undertones of the game that are overtly politically propagandistic? Yes. Is it bent, meaning partisan? Yes. But is that actually the worst part of the game? Well, only if you are approaching it from a very analytical standpoint regarding the narrative itself and the actual setting that you've created. With that game, it doesn't make any sense, and that to me is the most offensive part about it, is that if you think about it for more than a second, it doesn't make any sense on its face. But outside of that, does it weigh down the game so badly that it ruins the game? No. In my view, other aspects do that about the game, that weigh it down to such an extent that overall it's just not a very good game. And based on how little content they've produced for it over time, since it's released, I imagine they know that. I imagine they know that this game is kind of a dud and they can't really do anything with it. So let's put out some piecemeal fucking DLC, but that's going to be about it. That's as far as they go with it. With Far Cry 6, it all depends on how well the game performs. And with Far Cry 5 under their belt, a decent amount of people are going to buy this game because of that, but I imagine that for the core fans, they probably have a bad taste in their mouth because of the spin-off, which is a name I'm forgetting offhand, but whatever, it doesn't matter. The spin-off they made that was like a direct sequel to Far Cry 5 that sucked fucking ass. It's an Ubisoft game. You're going to have your zombie buyer, so this game is going to sell a few million copies. But outside of that, it's all up to the quality of the game. Games today live or die based on the content of the game itself. And while you're going to have the zombie buyers for the first 2 months, 3 months, past that point, such as it was with Cyberpunk, if the game isn't itself good enough, then you're just not going to have any sales. And with Far Cry 6, I think it'll be the same. Zombie buyers, day one, yeah, you're going to have that, but past that point, it's all up to the content of the game. And the fact is that while, you can question the legitimacy of Get Woke, Go Broke, clearly there is an issue of if your game has enough shit in it that's woke, you're going to have your zombie buyer sales, but past that point, it's not going to sell. Because the fact is that the inclusion of this content in these games does not sell these games. It's clear as day. Everyone should know it at this point. But the fact is that the management at this company refuses to simply create their games without this content. They force this content into these games. It is not a selling point. And the reality is that past the initial, hype buyers, zombie buyers from the beginning, so release day plus 2 months, past that point, the game lives or dies on the actual quality. And if the game is not up to snuff, people simply won't buy it. And that is simply the status quo of the industry. To summarize, however, as it relates to this particular issue, I am not really angered by this. It hasn't really changed my opinion of the game. I'm not really offended by this. I just kind of roll my eyes at it, and it makes Navid here look like a fucking idiot and a pussy. But it doesn't actually speak to the content of the game. And so, as I said in my initial video, I am simply going to sit back and wait for release day. And if the game stands up, then I will probably buy it. But if the game has enough baggage around it, people are complaining about it, there's all this stupid shit with it, then I just will skip it. It's that simple. It's another $60. It's another crappy Ubisoft game. The sort of watered down oatmeal of the industry. It's an Ubisoft game. And it's not really something that I need to buy, but at the same time, most of these games aren't so offensive that I just choose not to buy them. However, I think that, they can speak to how daring they are, but they never are. They never are really bold with the content they produce. Never. I can't imagine them actually making this like a legit propaganda game. Because then it would be like a game that, like Life is Strange, that I would play ironically and that people can enjoy the streams of because it's so shitty and stupid. I said this the same thing when it came to Watch Dogs Legion. And while it definitely had its political propagandistic crap angle to it, it was in no way offensive enough to where I wanted to show it to you. Because overall, the story and the setting and every aspect to it was just generic. It had its left-wing bent that made no sense, but it wasn't so over-the-top and offensive that I wanted to show it to you and stream it and we can all laugh at it. It's just there and it falls flat, and that's all there is. And with this game, even if it is propaganda, my assumption is that it's going to be a lot like Legion, where it just is a wet fart, and that's all there is to it. It's never going to be so over the top and offensive that I'm going to want to stream it and show you and buy it and show you and make money on it and we'll all laugh at it. I doubt it. I doubt it's going to be that, because no other game in the franchise has been that. None of them. And no Ubisoft games are like that. Because I imagine management does not allow it. And when rumors come out of Rockstar that that's what they're going to do with their next game, the fucking guy who pioneered the whole goddamn company gets axed. Why? Because money talks. At the end of the day, you can put in your woke bullshit, but money fucking talks. As irritating as it is, it's about money. And it's just kind of pathetic. So I will leave it there. Thank you for listening.